Welcome to Privacy Effect. Recently, a video from the Jimmy Dore Show titled "Israeli Spyware Embedded on Every Samsung Phone" caught my attention. It immediately brought to mind the recent news about page bomb attacks. I decided to investigate further, and what I found was deeply alarming. In this video, we'll distill the most critical findings about what may be the most serious digital threat inside your pocket today, drawing on verified technical analyses, legal documents, and human rights investigations. Our mission is crystal clear. We're diving deep into the shadowy, high-stakes world of commercial-grade mobile spyware, far beyond your usual virus or clickbait phishing scam. This is an invisible war zone. And today, we're moving past the well-known names like Pegasus to uncover their next-generation successors, the cutting-edge tools that most people don't even know exist. So, what's next? We're looking at tools like the newly identified Landfall framework, as well as the hidden dangers of pre-installed supply chain surveillance. The urgency here is tied directly to the technology we use every single day. We're focusing on the zero-click exploit, the capability to compromise your mobile device without you opening a link, answering a call, or even touching the screen. No user interaction is needed. We're talking about specific targets, including owners of high-end Samsung Galaxy devices, the S22, S23, S24 series, and critically, the widely popular mid-range A and M series phones, particularly those in sensitive geopolitical regions like the Middle East and North Africa.
Think about the level of trust you place in your phone. It's your digital vault, holding everything from your biometrics, your fingerprints, your face scans, to encrypted communications, detailed location history, and sensitive financial apps. When we discuss zero-click exploitation, we are talking about private sector offensive actors, or PSOAs. These are companies selling governments the ability to fundamentally violate that trust at the deepest operational level. We need to know where this infrastructure is being built, and as we're about to see, sometimes it's installed before you even unbox the device. To truly grasp how deep this rabbit hole goes, we have to start with a case study involving a profound breach of consumer trust, facilitated by a global hardware giant. Imagine you are in the Middle East or North Africa, a region where mid-range smartphones are the backbone of digital communication. You buy a brand new, trusted Samsung A or M series phone, expecting operational security right out of the box. That expectation, however, was completely shattered by the findings of digital human rights groups like SMEX, the social media exchange. Their investigation revealed a covert partnership, one that dates back to 2022, between Samsung and the Israeli tech firm ironSource. This deal fundamentally changed the nature of the phone before it ever reached the consumer, through the pre-installation of software, specifically a program called AppCloud. AppCloud then silently installs a secondary companion program known as Aura. This deal fundamentally changed the nature of the phone before it ever reached the consumer, through the pre-installation of software, specifically a program called AppCloud. AppCloud then silently installs a secondary companion program known as Aura. Crucially, the study reports show that this software was installed without the user's consent or even their knowledge, mainly targeting specific states and regions. You didn't download it. You didn't agree to any terms. It was simply there, running quietly in the background. This is more than just unwelcome bloatware. The installation of AppCloud in Aura constitutes a serious violation of data protection principles, even for users outside the strictest jurisdictions, because of what it collects. The software is designed to collect deeply sensitive data, like your biometric identifiers, your device's unique IP address, and comprehensive device fingerprints. All of this is harvested without a transparent, accessible privacy policy. The user is completely unable to opt out, control the data flow, or even know how or where this highly personal data is being processed and used. This is where the suspense really builds, and the nature of the threat becomes truly insidious. SMEX characterized the Aura AppCloud suite as intrusive and, significantly, unremovable. That phrase, unremovable, is the key. The software is not merely an app you can drag to the trash. It's integrated deep into the operating system. To delete it, you need to gain root access to your device, which is a whole other can of worms. It's a technically complex operation that immediately invalidates your warranty and often introduces other severe security risks by opening up system permissions. It creates a digital trap. Remove the threat and void your legal protections, or keep the threat and risk constant data collection. It's a catch-22. Sources confirm that even attempting to manage or disable this pre-installed software is ultimately ineffective. The mechanism has a sinister resilience. Even if a sophisticated user manages to temporarily disable the bloatware, analysis shows it can automatically reappear after routine system updates. This means the manufacturer, via its partnership, is essentially re-establishing the surveillance infrastructure every time you attempt to keep your phone secure with a patch. The alleged opt-out mechanism provided by the vendor, according to SMEC's research, required submitting a form that actually never exists. It's a fantasy. It renders deletion a fantasy. So we aren't talking about a random hacker sending a malicious attachment. This is a bona fide supply chain attack. The phone, a brand you trusted, is compromised the moment it leaves the warehouse, before the shrink wrap is even removed. This forces us to ask an essential question. If a globally trusted brand facilitates the construction of this kind of data collection and surveillance infrastructure, how can anyone using these devices in these specific targeted regions ever be certain their foundational hardware is safe? The Samsung case study forces us to confront a fundamental psychological defense mechanism most users rely on: the comfort barrier. We tell ourselves, I'm not that important. I'm not a target, so I must be safe. That barrier has not only been weakened, it has been completely demolished by the commercialization of digital espionage. When Pegasus spyware first appeared in the public consciousness, the media narrative suggested it was reserved for the highest echelons: international criminals, drug lords, or specific terrorist organizations. That perception was a lie that provided false security to millions. The reality is much, much darker. The list of confirmed or potential Pegasus targets demonstrates the sheer breadth of its use. We're talking about targeting journalists like Jamal Khashoggi's associates and family months before his murder, and Ben Hubbard from the New York Times in Beirut, who was repeatedly subjected to these attacks. It targets lawyers working on sensitive cases, human rights activists globally, and even high-ranking political figures like sitting presidents of Iraq and France, and prime ministers of Spain and Morocco. This is not a small-time operation. The psychological shift is driven by the sheer commoditization of this technology. These sophisticated tools are sold as a modular, subscription-based service by private sector offensive actors, groups like NSO or the Clunk 1054 organization behind Landfall. They are essentially digital arms dealers, making zero-click hacking capabilities accessible to dozens of regimes worldwide, often regimes that previously lacked the internal technical expertise to pull off such sophisticated intrusions. The consequence of that commoditization is that it drives down the price and widens the net. You don't have to be a head of state anymore. You just need to be a thorn in the side of a paying client. This means a climate change activist, a labor organizer, a student protesting corruption in the Dominican Republic, or a Tibetan cleric in exile all become viable targets because the price point is now within the budget of smaller national agencies. That feeling of, I'm not important enough, is the attacker's greatest psychological asset. Nothing reinforces that loss of control like the transition from the one-click to the zero-click attack vector. For decades, our security education revolved around vigilance. Hover over the link, check the sender's address, don't open the suspicious attachment. That method relied entirely on stopping human error. But the modern threat, exemplified by later Pegasus versions and this Landfall campaign, removes the user entirely from the defense loop. These are passive zero-click attacks. They don't require social engineering, deceit, or clicking anything. Nothing. They exploit inherent deep software flaws, the 0 days, and can install themselves silently through data your phone processes in the background, a malicious image file, a missed video call notification, or even a text message that never appears in your inbox. It fundamentally breaks the psychological contract we have with technology. We assume competence and vigilance are protective shields. But when a piece of spyware can establish full remote access, extract biometrics, and rewrite the fundamental rules of the operating system just because the phone received a piece of malformed data, that feeling of safety just evaporates. It's gone. That loss of agency, losing the ability to control your own device, is what makes this a terrifying invisible invasion. Let's unpack the specifics of this invisible invasion. If the Samsung case showed us the supply chain compromise, the Landfall spyware shows us the evolution of the technical zero-click threat in the Android world. We are going to detail the full anatomy of the Landfall attack, which focused on modern, high-end Samsung Galaxy devices, the S22, S23, S24 series, and the Z Fold and Flip 4 in the Middle East. The first thing to recognize here is the commonality with previous sophisticated attacks. Attackers don't target random parts of the operating system. They constantly go for weak points. They go after components that handle complex, external, untrusted data. In this case, media processing was the key vulnerability. Landfall exploited a zero-day flaw identified as CVE 202.52142. What exactly is this alphanumeric soup, and where was this flaw located on Samsung phones? It was an out-of-bounds write flaw found in a critical system library called library-inch-codec.quorum.so. In simple terms, this library is part of the deep system code that handles rendering and interpreting images and multimedia files. An out-of-bounds write is a memory corruption vulnerability, so it's about how the phone's memory works. Imagine your phone allocates a small bucket, a memory buffer, for processing an image file. If the file is maliciously crafted to contain data larger than that bucket, the excess data overflows and starts writing malicious instructions into adjacent protected memory areas. So the image file is essentially tricking the phone into running unauthorized code because the processing library didn't check the size limit correctly. This library is called upon when your phone receives any image, often even before you open the messaging app, because the OS needs to create a thumbnail or analyze the file type. That analysis step is where the vulnerability was triggered, allowing remote code execution. So how did the attackers deliver this payload? Phase 1 was delivery via maliciously crafted DNG files. DNG, that's digital negative, a raw photo format. These files are typically complex and large, which makes the processing highly prone to memory corruption flaws. The attackers cunningly disguise these DNG files with generic file names to make them look harmless, designed to look like they came from WhatsApp, such as img20024A0723 WA00000.jpg. That file name disguise sounds like a subtle nod to social engineering, even in a zero-click attack. They want the file to look innocent enough that if it was ever forensically examined, it would appear to be an ordinary photo. The critical technical detail is that the malformed DNG file contained an embedded zip archive hidden inside the image. The exploitation of that CVE, that vulnerability, allowed the attackers to gain control of the execution flow in the vulnerable library and then instruct the phone to extract and execute the contents of that hidden zip archive. And that's pure zero-click. Receive a malformed image, and the phone automatically executes the first stage of the spyware. No interaction required. The first component extracted from that zip archive is the loader, a shared object library referred to as BISO. Its internal naming convention confirms its origin in this commercial spyware ecosystem. Internally within the code, this loader refers to itself using the debug name Bridgehead. This is a significant tradecraft indicator. Bridgehead is a common nickname or internal term used by several prominent private sector offensive actors, specifically groups like NSO Group, the Italian firm Veriston, and Citrox for their first-stage reconnaissance loaders. That suggests standardization. It's not just a unique attack. It's modular software built using standardized, proven components shared across the PSOE industry. This implies that these groups are sharing resources, or at least standardized development practices. It confirms Landfall is not an isolated amateur operation. It is high-end commercial spyware built for maximum utility and deployability. Once BISO is executed, it establishes the foothold, the bridgehead. Its primary function is comprehensive device fingerprinting. What exactly does that fingerprinting entail? It's far deeper than just checking the device model. This module gathers the OS version and build number, the device's unique hardware ID, the IMEI, the SIM card serial number, user account details, and it performs extensive reconnaissance on the network. It checks the installed apps, the current VPN status, whether the user is using a proxy, and whether developer options like USB debugging are enabled. Why collect all that? Why so much detail? Two reasons. First, target confirmation. The software needs to verify if this is the correct target device before downloading the more resource-intensive permanent stages. Don't waste the good stuff. Second, anti-forensics. By knowing the exact OS build and installed apps, the next stages can tailor their behavior to evade specific security or debugging tools that might be present. All this configuration data is packaged, often as an encrypted JSON object, and used to communicate back to the command structure. It's during this phase that the malware reveals its operational limitations, like its internal self-destruct mechanism. The BISO component contains critical, hard-coded parameters that define its lifecycle. We see network flags like allow Wi-Fi being true and allow roaming being false, a way to avoid detection or expense when the target is traveling. And critically, the suicide time parameter set to 7,200 seconds or 2 hours. This is the ultimate operational security protocol. If the loader cannot successfully contact the command and control server, or if the initial deployment phase runs past the 2-hour mark, it cleans itself up. It initiates a self-cleanup and deletion routine. That is terrifyingly efficient. They prioritize a clean getaway and minimizing forensic evidence over mission success. It tells you they are preparing for the target to notice the strange behavior, but they want to ensure no evidence is left behind. The next stage is crucial for ensuring the malware can operate unimpeded. Once the BISO loader is running, it extracts a second component, ELSO, from an XZ compressed binary. This component is the Linux Policy Manipulator. For those who aren't familiar, Linux stands for Security Enhanced Linux. Think of it as the ultimate guard dog of the Android operating system. It enforces mandatory access control or MAC policies, so it puts up walls between everything on the phone. Every application, every system process is given a defined set of permissions, a restrictive whitelist of what it can access, what files it can read, and what system calls it can make. So Linux is the security architecture that prevents one app, like your photo gallery, from suddenly trying to read the files stored by your banking app. So it's the layer that separates and restricts all the processes on the phone, and also bypasses that entirely. This by dynamically modifying the Linux policy in memory. So it's not a permanent change on the disk. Instead of relying on the system's hard-coded rules, the malware implements a specialized engine that can parse and load entirely new Linux policy statements on the fly. This grants the spyware arbitrary elevated permissions to perform deep system functions, effectively giving it God mode access to the device, allowing it to look at any file or listen to any communication it wants. How does the malware do all this without the operating system noticing? Because the entire infection chain is staged with extreme precision. All of its components, BISO, ELSO, and the final payload, are quietly dropped into a hidden system folder inside the app's private workspace. data/com.samsung, IP service/files. A place the user never sees. To actually run its code with high privileges, the malware uses a classic deception technique called LD_preload. In simple terms, it tricks the phone into loading its own malicious code first before anything else. And here's the clever part. It does this by launching a completely harmless system tool, something the phone totally trusts. So while the system believes it's just starting a normal utility, the malware has already hijacked the process at the very beginning. It inherits all the elevated permissions that were opened up by the modified Linux policy. No warnings. No pop-ups. Just a silent takeover. It's a brilliant piece of sneaky engineering. With its elevated privileges in place, the spyware enters its main spying phase. It quietly reaches out to its command and control server, its C2. These servers use innocent-looking domain names, things like brightvideodesigns.com or healthyeatingontherun.com, so they blend into normal internet traffic. The malware constantly checks in through an encrypted HTTPS connection. This repeating check-in pattern is called a beaconing loop. During the first beacon, it sends a post request packed with detailed information about the device. This internal profile is known as the bridgehead. Once the C2 server verifies that the device is the intended target, it responds with the next set of instructions and the capabilities the spyware should activate. Let's take a closer look at what the hell Landfall is doing on our phone, one that cost us about $1,000. Looking at the debug artifacts within that loader component, the BISO file, the analysis suggests the ultimate potential of the full Landfall framework. The potential capability list is comprehensive. It shows the operator's intent to harvest virtually all personal data. This includes comprehensive eavesdropping. The code contains command strings for recording microphone activity, recording calls, and wholesale gathering of call history, the entire contacts database, and SMS message data. So all your communications, from calls to messages, are targeted. Landfall also focuses on file system and location exfiltration. It targets specific data types, collecting camera photos, pulling arbitrary files from storage, extracting browser databases, and maintaining continuous access to location services. This means your entire browsing history, cookies, saved passwords, and real-time location are all vulnerable. This is where the sophistication really shows. Landfall employs advanced evasion tactics. The software is engineered to actively detect and bypass common forensic and debugging tools, looking for the presence of the Frida instrumentation framework and the exposed framework. It specifically checks for a tracer PID debugger to avoid detection. Why is detecting Frida and exposed so crucial? Because if you're a high-value target and you suspect infection, You might hire a digital forensic investigator who would use tools like Frida or Exposed to monitor the malware's processes, analyze its memory usage, and try to reverse engineer its behavior. That level of anti-forensic design confirms this is truly a weapon built by highly resourced private sector offensive actors. The operators even included highly specific, strange code snippets that reveal their attention to detail, like code to harvest the newest photo from the DCIM folder, while excluding a small cover artifact the malware itself might have planted, or commands to precisely check the battery status via SIFS, likely to ensure their surveillance isn't draining the battery too quickly and giving away its presence. It shows incredible planning. The complexity of the image exploitation, the Linux bypass, and the sophisticated evasion techniques, it's all designed for stealth and persistence in the face of rigorous security countermeasures. So we've established the scope of the problem. Zero-click attacks, bypass human vigilance, and sophisticated spyware is being sold as a service. Now let's pivot to empowerment. If the attackers are this advanced, what practical steps can you, as an average customer, take? I've distilled 3 core rules to counter these advanced threats. Rule 1. Patch immediately, always. This might sound like standard IT advice, but it is the single most critical defense against zero-click attacks once they are known to the vendor. Let's use the Landfall example to highlight this. The entire operation relied entirely on one specific memory corruption flaw, CVE 202524142. Samsung was aware of this, and they released a fix for that specific vulnerability in April 2025. That is the window of protection. Every Samsung Galaxy S or Z series user who installed that April 2025 security update immediately closed the critical door the Landfall attackers used as their entry point. So these attacks exploit unpatched vulnerabilities. While the vulnerability might have been a zero-day unknown publicly when the attack started in mid-2024, once vendors like Samsung or Apple release a patch, installing it instantly neutralizes the exploit chain. So don't put it off. Prioritizing those mobile OS updates the moment they are released, within hours, not days or weeks, is mandatory for high-risk users. Rule 2. The 2-step digital cleanse for suspected infection. If you are someone who belongs to the high-value target pool, a journalist, an activist, an opposition official, and you have legitimate reason to suspect infection, standard antivirus is completely insufficient. What's the first step? Restart the phone. This is surprisingly effective as a first step. Many sophisticated spyware components, particularly non-persistent initial loaders like some found in Pegasus campaigns, rely on running in the device's temporary memory. Shutting down and restarting the phone can clear these ephemeral components and terminate the active infection process. It provides temporary relief, but this is just buying time. What's the ultimate step? Factory reset. This is often called the digital nuclear option, but it is the only true method of removal for root-level, highly persistent commercial spyware like Landfall or Pegasus. And the essential caveat here cannot be overstated. You must not restore from an existing backup. You must completely wipe the device, rebooting it to its original factory state. And the essential caveat here cannot be overstated. You must not restore from an existing backup. If you restore from a cloud backup, whether it's an iOS or Android backup, you run a high risk of reintroducing the persistent files or configuration elements of the spyware. This nullifies the entire security exercise. It is painful to set up a phone entirely from scratch, but if you are dealing with a state-level threat, starting fresh and restoring only essential files individually, photos, contacts, documents, is the only secure way forward. Rule 3. Use forensic tools if you have the technical expertise. For confirmed, sophisticated zero-click attacks, detection is extremely difficult, requiring specialized methods far beyond consumer-grade security software. The open-source community has provided excellent tools, most notably Amnesty International's Mobile Verification Toolkit, or MVT. MVT is not an app you download from the store. It is a command-line tool designed for deep forensic analysis. It allows you to analyze exported phone data, encrypted iOS backups, or Android file system dumps, specifically hunting for indicators of compromise, or IOCs, known to be associated with Pegasus, Landfall, and similar advanced threats. That sounds like it requires significant technical expertise. It's not a one-click solution. It absolutely requires considerable know-how, including familiarity with command-line interfaces and data analysis. Alternatively, there are niche methods, such as those developed by Kaspersky Labs, which involve inspecting the device's internal shutdown.log file for malicious signatures. However, that method is only effective if the device is rebooted on the same day the infection occurred due to log rotation limits. So the takeaway is clear. If you suspect deep-level compromise, especially if you fit the profile of a state-sponsored target, your first move should not be a general online search. You must immediately contact a specialized digital rights organization, like Citizen Lab or SMEX, or a professional incident response team. These groups are equipped not only with the tools like MVT, but also the expertise to interpret the complex data dumps and identify those subtle evasion traces left by the attackers. The sheer proliferation and sophistication of commercial spyware mean that the battle for digital safety cannot be fought solely by the individual user. This is a global issue that requires collective accountability fought in the courts and through international regulation. Thankfully, the accountability gap for these private sector offensive actors is narrowing, largely because large technology companies are taking aggressive legal action. The precedent set by Meta's WhatsApp lawsuit against NSO Group is a legal game-changer. It truly is. What happened there? WhatsApp sued NSO Group, accusing the company of using its infrastructure to deliver Pegasus to the devices of about 1,400 users, including journalists, activists, and diplomats back in 2019. It wasn't just a privacy lawsuit. It was about infrastructure sabotage. In December 2024, a U.S. court ruled NSO Group liable for violating the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, CFAA, a core anti-hacking statute in the U.S., and for violating WhatsApp's terms of service. Why is the CFAA ruling so significant? The CFAA violation is critical because it established that NSO Group, the seller of the cyberweapon, was liable for violating the terms of service of WhatsApp and for unauthorized access to Meta's networks, even though NSO's clients, the purchasing governments, were the ones physically operating the software. So it puts the blame on the manufacturer of the weapon, not just the user. It fundamentally alters the PSOE business model globally. If the supplier of the tools can be held legally and financially liable for the misuse of their products by their clients, it places an enormous legal burden on them and theoretically shrinks the market for these tools. Beyond Meta, we also saw Apple take a strong stance and the U.S. government got involved. Apple filed a parallel lawsuit against NSO Group, seeking a permanent injunction to bar them from using any Apple software, hardware, or services. The U.S. government also got involved, taking the geopolitical step of placing NSO Group on a blacklist, declaring their activities contrary to the foreign policy and national security interests of the U.S., which makes it extremely difficult for them to do business. This designation makes it nearly impossible for NSO to access U.S. technology and supplies. These collective actions signal a global regulatory shift, aiming to treat these zero-click tools as digital armaments rather than merely commercial software. But the threat isn't contained just to the companies that write the code. We have to look at the issue of manufacturer complicity, which brings us right back to the Samsung ironSource deal involving AppCloud and Aura. This is a distinct and worrying type of infrastructure breach. Unlike the zero-click attacks that rely on finding a sophisticated momentary flaw, the Aura AppCloud case involved a conscious, intentional partnership to integrate intrusive data-collecting software directly into the supply chain. This means that multinational corporations, knowingly or unknowingly, become essential infrastructure for surveillance by embedding unremovable, opaque data collectors into consumer devices that harvest biometrics, IP addresses, and device fingerprints. The fact that this software was primarily integrated in specific regions is a huge red flag. The restriction of this software integration, primarily to regions with noted geopolitical tensions, specifically the Middle East and North Africa, raises serious ethical and accountability concerns. Regardless of the intent of the partnership, the outcome is that consumers in these specific regions are being sold phones that are, by design, fundamentally less secure and more invasive than the same model sold in Europe, or the U.S. groups like SMEX argue this is an unacceptable threat to digital rights in those communities. Finally, there is the problem of proliferation. Even if these major PSOAs are shut down, the methods and the code don't disappear. That's the unintended dangerous consequence of building highly advanced commercial cyber weapons. Sources note that code similar to NSO's Pegasus has been documented as being reused by Russian-linked intelligence agencies. This technology doesn't stay confined to the original client list. It leaks, It's reverse engineered, or it's sold off in pieces. The landfall activity itself shares infrastructural patterns and tradecraft, like the bridgehead naming convention, with other commercial spyware operations like Stealth Falcon. So there's a network effect. This network effect ensures that tools designed for one narrow, specific client quickly infect the broader digital ecosystem, making the threat universal. You've just absorbed the chilling reality of zero-click compromise and the commercial infrastructure that funds it. You are no longer just a smartphone owner. You are now a digitally aware survivor, armed with knowledge of how invisible, weaponized software operates at the deepest layers of your device. The biggest, most actionable technical pattern we discovered today points to systematic vulnerabilities. This pattern connects the evolution from Pegasus's older methods to the new landfall threat, reshaping your security mindset. That systemic weakness is the persistent, continuous targeting of image processing libraries and media handling components. Whether it was Pegasus exploiting a DNG file flaw against Apple, or Landfall exploiting the vimage codec.quorum.so flaw on Samsung, systems designed to handle complex media, especially raw formats like DNG, which are meant for high-fidelity photo capture, are repeatedly viewed by the most sophisticated attackers as the universal weak link. Why is that? They know that media processing is a complex operation that runs deep in the system, often without user interaction, making it the perfect zero-click entry point. With that systematic threat in mind, here is your immediate call to action. First, prioritize patching aggressively. This goes back to Rule 1. We established that the April 2025 Samsung patch closed the door on the landfall exploit. Do not defer or delay mobile OS security updates. This is the single easiest and most effective way to neutralize known threats. Second, audit your device for bloatware. This is specific to Samsung A and M series users. If you or someone you know operates one of the targeted mid-range Samsung devices in the MENA region, you must actively and ruthlessly review your installed apps. Specifically, hunt for unfamiliar, unremovable system apps like AppCloud or Aura. While you may not be able to delete it without voiding the warranty, you should follow the recommendations of digital rights groups like SMEX. Rigorously disable location tracking and unnecessary permissions for every application on your device that might feed data to the intrusive software. Limit its ability to harvest information, even if you can't remove the root component. The knowledge of how these commercial spy tools operate, how they evade detection, and how corporations can inadvertently participate in surveillance infrastructure is the difference between being a passive victim and an active, critical user. It's a reminder that beneath the shiny surface of the technology we rely on every minute of every day, hidden, well-funded threats lurk. Stay alert, stay informed, and share what you've learned, because protecting our digital security is something we all share responsibility for. That's it for today's topic. Keep your eyes open and make sure your phone stays up to date.
That wraps up today's discussion. Thanks for watching and tuning in. If you're curious to dive deeper into this topic, make sure to visit our website. The link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell so you never miss an update. See you next time.